Okay, welcome to another episode in our series For the Love of Star Wars, where we return with a new guest to discuss a specific piece of Star Wars media that they absolutely love. This one should be a very interesting one as we have a guest with a fantastic pick. That guest being BOE. Hello.
How you doing, BOE?
Hi.
Welcome back.
Hi, everyone.
No, as I said, we are excited to discuss this as you've thought a little bit outside the box for this one. Please tell us what it is that you've chosen to talk about this week.
Well, I've got copies of them here. So
Copies
the
plural.
main thing we're going to talk about is the documentary Empire of Dreams, which came out 2004. So it's 20 years old. It came in the first release of the DVD original trilogy.
Brilliant.
And it's a brilliant 2.5-hour documentary. I watched it this morning. Brilliant stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think with Empire of Dreams, the main focus is the actual creation of Star Wars, because that's the biggest part of this DVD. And then it goes on to about half an hour on Empire, half an hour on Jedi.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, Star Wars is my favorite movie as well. So most people would say Empire, but Star Wars for me, I saw it 14th of February 1978, which was my 8th birthday. Obviously, it was something we'd never seen anything like that before. I mean, I remember seeing on like the children's TV, BBC back in those days, and it had been on black and white television in those days. A clip from Star Wars in '77, maybe on something called Screen Test or Newsround, that had a little clip, and it had Luke in the X-wing, and it's like that sort of connected with Space 1999 because they had orange outfits as well. So I knew I'd like it.
Yeah,
because I like that. And obviously Star Trek as well back in the day. But yeah, I mean, I love that first movie. It's just and also getting the toys pretty, because we didn't have to wait so long like in American viewers. We only had to wait a couple of months till the toys came out, and for me, the toys are, something that's interlinked the movie and the playing with the toys in those days, because you could only see the movie a few times in the cinema, and then you were left to your own imagination with the toys and the comics, the Star Wars Weekly, and the trading cards. But so that's why Star Wars: A New Hope is my favorite Star Wars movie.
Yeah.
Even though I'll admit Empire is probably more technically better, but it's just Star Wars is.
But Star Wars is the original, isn't it? So so let's get into Empire of Dreams a little bit. As you said, it was released in 2004. It was September 21st. Directed by Edith Becker and Kevin Burns. IMDb gave this an 8.2 out of 10, which is a bit of a travesty, really. I think it should be higher.
Hell yeah, 8.2. That's shocking.
Yeah. This was actually, in preparation for this, was the first time that I've watched Empire of Dreams, BOE.
My gosh.
Yeah, I know it's a bit of a shock, but 2.5 hours of brilliance. I actually struggled to write notes for this episode because I was so engrossed just watching the documentary.
Yeah.
I
mean, what's good about it is it starts with the sort of the times, the sort of 70s, the gritty realism of the films, like Towering Inferno, all that sort of stuff, the America coming out of Vietnam. Yeah, I mean, Star Wars was like, and they say it's like they use Walter Cronkite or another American journalist to say that it was the sort of tonic that lifted America out of its sort of dark depression in a way.
So what is it about Empire then, Empire of Dreams, I should say, that you love so much? Like what made you pick this?
It's just that the totality of it, that it talks about the making of the movies, the sort of developing the special effects, which were all new, the creation of industrial lighter magic, which even when they were making A New Hope, it was sort of got to the point where George Lucas became quite worried because they hadn't produced any film yet, any special effects that were acceptable yet, and they'd spent half the money on developing all the technology they'd need to make the special effects, like those motion tracking computers. That was all new, brand new stuff in those days, and so it was like, it was just groundbreaking stuff. Because if you think before that, the best special effects probably were in Space 1999, which was done over here, and 2001 AD.
It's incredible to see. Obviously I haven't seen much up until this behind the curtain, if you like, of the Star Wars world and how it was created back in the day. So just to see how it was, and to see like all the struggles that they went through with budget, and and how was it Alan Ladd Jr., the guy at Fox, how he he always had his belief in the film even when others didn't, and it really paid off. I think we can thank him quite a bit, can't we?
I mean, it has lots of interviews with various guys that worked at 20th Century Fox, and like there's a British guy who says to his family, children, today I've seen the greatest movie ever made. I'd never thought I'd ever see that, but today I've seen Star Wars.
He cried, didn't he, after watching it?
So it's what I like about that is documentary is that it approaches from Star Wars, the creation of Star Wars, and its effects as well from all angles. So you've got the making of, you've got all the technical side from that. You've got the films that led up to Star Wars, THX 1138, American Graffiti, American Zoetrope, the company that Lucas was working with Francis Ford Coppola. How Lucas went to film school at USC, University of Southern California, and what led him to working on Star Wars was becoming a sort of disciple of Joseph Campbell and the Hero with 1,000 Faces, and sort of looking at all the mythologies of the world and sort of distilling them down to the common what is now known as the hero's journey, which is what we see in Star Wars, with the path that Luke takes.
I mean, George was a massive visionary. It's clear to see here. But Martin, what sort of thoughts have you got on this? Because you obviously love it as well.
Yeah, I've watched this set documentary since 2004, probably as much as I watched the movies. It's an amazing time capsule that was made at just the right moment, because most of the main players were still around and able to talk about the making of the original trilogy. And obviously we'll go into more detail, but I've written a little bit out here because I thought it was really important that people, obviously of our generation, understand how big and important Star Wars was back in the day, but to all the new generations who hear the stories about Star Wars and what it meant to the people back then, and what it had to go through in order to be made, have got this documentary sitting there to be able to watch, so that they can understand, as you did, Adam, because you obviously said you never watched this. You probably never knew half the things that went on. So basically, for those who didn't realize how revolutionary the original Star Wars trilogy was in terms of filmmaking, special effects, sound design, social impact, merchandising, with the exception of Jaws creating the summer global blockbuster and basically reinvigorating the film industry, need to look no further than this documentary, because it covers not everything in massive detail, but it covers it in enough detail for you to see how revolutionary, as you said, Adam, George Lucas was, and how far he managed to push all those amazing people around him in special effects, in art department, in editing. He pushed these people who said, we've never done this before, to actually create what we saw on the screen, and for the most part still holds up 50 years later. So and then we also got to see things that we got to see the casting of the actors and people who were auditioning but didn't quite make it. Kurt Russell. I mean, who thought you'd ever see Kurt Russell trying to be Han Solo? Moments like that
And
are just
somebody I didn't know auditioned for that role.
Absolutely. And Lucasfilm, when George owned the company, had this reputation for creating documentaries and feature-length documentaries for all of the productions that they made. Whether it be Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Willow, whatever they made, there was always so much, because George always had somebody behind the scenes filming. It didn't matter what there was being done, there was always someone filming behind the scenes. And we got some of the greatest documentaries out of Star Wars. We got the making of Star Wars for the original film. We got From Star Wars to Jedi, the making of a saga, back in 1984. We got The Beginning, episode 1, that amazing 1 hour documentary.
It's a brilliant documentary.
We got Puppets to Pixels for episode 2. We got Within a Minute for Revenge of the Sith.
Okay.
But this documentary stands head and shoulders ahead of anything else they ever did, as I'd argue probably better than, and it's difficult for me to say this because I love those documentaries, the Lord of the Rings documentaries that came out on the extended cuts. This, because Star Wars is my thing, this would be the greatest documentary to ever be made for any film fan or any Star Wars fan. And I'm going to shut up now.
No, you're right, because it covers so much. It covers the technical aspects of making the film, inspirations, sort of like Joseph Campbell, the laborious process of writing the movie, dividing it into 3. If I can get the first part made, I'll make the other 2 parts. Approaching the studios, getting accepted by Alan Ladd. Lucas being very savvy and keeping the rights to all merchandise, or most merchandise, setting up of ILM, THX and all that sort of stuff, interviews with all the technical gurus in Star Wars, Ben Burtt, all the guys that worked on the model, making the models, all that sort of stuff. It's just great to see all these guys talk about what they did. And, it's just quite inspiring, really. And it's a great insight on how to make a film yourself, if you ever felt inclined to do that. And and also there's the stuff about the sort of cultural impact of the first Star Wars film. You get lots of clips of the Mann's Chinese theater, also when C-3PO and R2-D2 and Darth Vader put their footprints into the concrete. Also quite a bit about the merchandising, the comics, the action figures, which is obviously what all 3 of us are into. And so
did you get an early bird set, BOE?
We never had it here.
Did we not have it in the UK? I didn't know that.
No, of course. No, I mean, because Star Wars didn't really get released till 27th of December 1977, so it was really
interesting.
1978 that it truly came out.
So I was born in 78, so I was a bit behind.
So how long was it? How long was the run in the cinemas? Did they keep it in the cinema for a long time, or?
I really can't remember, because I first thing I ever owned from Star Wars was the Star Wars Weekly comic. I got issue 2, which is and then my mum said, on your birthday we're going to go see Star Wars, and I didn't want to go, but someone said it's got a dinosaur in it, so I thought I'd go then, because I was dinosaur mad then. But when we went, it just I can remember vividly going on the bus. We had Chris, because we had my friends with me because it's my birthday. We had Golden Wonder sausage and tomato crisp. I can remember that. How can I remember that from that far back? I can remember these things vividly from all that time. I remember at primary school, my friend had already seen Star Wars. He told me that there's a character called Han Solo. So in my mind, I thought that sounded Chinese. So because we were playing Star Wars, so I thought it was some sort of, I imagined it was someone like Mr. Spock crossed with a Chinese person, before I knew anything about, so it's just, that's how Star Wars came to me back in those days,
But do you remember, like, after you actually saw it at the cinema, then how you felt about it?
Oh yeah, we
Changed your
because my
world.
sister was there as well. We were on cloud nine. It was like that was never seen anything like that. It was like immediately my favorite film. It's just wow. I don't know if we saw it again because in those days it was money was tight, but my mom. I remember maybe a couple of months later, 3 months later, my mum said, "Oh, they got the figures at the toy shop, so we're going to go buy one." So that's what So,
absolutely.
Wasn't it nice in the documentary to see all of the behind the scenes footage of them not auditioning, sorry, acting out the scenes and the alternate cuts that we didn't get to see in the movie, and obviously us in the know would know it, but the bit where the sand people and the Tusken Raider
editing,
they had to roll it backwards and forwards, and
yeah.
just little moments like that in the documentary were just really special for a Star Wars fan who are interested in making films or how films are made, I should say. Seeing that sort of stuff is just incredible. And
well, obviously, because that's inspired me to make my own little films now and again. Obviously Red Army Bunker, and so you just take that knowledge that you learned from reading about how Star Wars was made or watching documentaries, and you just do the same.
So you were inspired more by the documentary than the films, or would you say?
No, I mean, I loved watching the movies. I was thinking about for a long time in the 80s, we didn't have the only way you could see Star Wars. I mean, the first time Star Wars came on TV was 82, and then 86 you could buy copies of the video, because before that then it was quite expensive. It was so I think it was about 15-20 quid in those days. And then but as soon as I could buy a copy of Star Wars on VHS, so I could watch it. Like, this is the 95 version, this is the last version that's unaltered, so which is
back to the documentary. Was there a particular sort of highlight? I know there's 2.5 hours of footage to choose from, but a particular highlight in the documentary that you always, I don't know, go back to and absolutely love?
I think the first hour and a half, when it focuses entirely on Star Wars, I think that's the better part. I think it's just like, it sets the scene in the 70s. It shows you how George Lucas, his first two movies, THX 1138 and American Graffiti, were cut by the studio, and how that affected him subsequently, that he had to gain control of his movies so that would never happen again. And then, I mean, the funny thing is, since then, he's often altered his movies, with the special editions and stuff like that, tinkering around with Star Wars, with the original trilogy,
It says
there's
in this
been so many changes to those movies. More recently, I don't know, maybe just to, increase Blu-ray sales, that, you've got to get the latest version of the original trilogy and stuff like that. But it seems people now want despecialized versions or the original versions more than anything else.
Martin, do you have a highlight in particular?
I mean, there's so many highlights. I mean, I suppose a highlight but a low light for George was finding out was, he actually, had hypertension towards the end of A New Hope, and he had to go to the hospital because he was under that much pressure and stress. That's, don't get me wrong, that's not a highlight, but I didn't know that until I'd watched this documentary the first time.
No, I think it's diabetes. He had
it
turned out to be diabetes. Okay. But hypertension was part of that.
Okay. So I mean, that was quite shocking to find that out, and he still pushed through, and still literally the next day was back at ILM pushing them to get the shots out for the film, and so that was one moment. There's a great line after the release of the first film that the commentator makes, that And the line is, ironically, the independent filmmaker that wanted nothing to do with corporate Hollywood was now credited with invigorating it, which I thought was, perfect. Because, I think I'm not saying that the film industry would never have been as big if it hadn't been for Star Wars, but it certainly was given a massive shot in the arm, wasn't it, because of Star Wars? And that's probably a very, very small way of saying it. But my favorite moment in the documentary, and it's just, I suppose you could argue it's a small moment, but when they're editing and they're getting A New Hope or Star Wars together and they're coming to the end of it, the guy who's narrating the documentary says, there was one final piece of the puzzle that George hadn't added to the mix yet, and it was John Williams' soundtrack.
Music,
and you see the orchestra with the big huge cinema screen start to play the music with the X-Wing attack on the Death Star. Every time I watch that in the documentary, I get goosebumps on my arm, because that dun, dun, dun.
To hear Johnny play the music for the first time is a thrill beyond anything I can describe.
So yeah, that's probably my favorite moment. And even when I watch the movie, and I watch it quite often, when that moment happens, I don't get the goosebumps, but I do in the documentary. It's really odd, but I think that's the thing the documentary does so well. At certain moments, it's riveting the whole way through, but at certain moments, it gives you that boost, and even after 2 hours and 35 minutes, I think every time I'm devastated there's not another hour left to go. I think they could have done at least another hour of Return of the Jedi and Empire Strikes Back.
That's it. They don't brush over Empire and Return of the Jedi as such, but obviously, as BOE said, it's largely focused around Star Wars, and that's what sort of built up to Empire. Because I'd actually forgotten that it was about the trilogy. Like, I was sort of, you're an hour into it, and it's like they're still talking about Star Wars, but you don't feel like they've forgotten Empire. But you get to that point where it's like, oh yeah, there's more to this documentary. Yeah.
I think with Star Wars, it's because it's the first one. That's where George Lucas really had to get down and dirty and fight in the trenches. Whereas in Empire, he's in a much more stable position. Even though towards the end of Empire, he had the bank backed out on giving him a further loan or something like that.
He was still funding Empire himself. Yeah.
He funded Empire himself, but he needed it went over 10 million. The budget went over 10 million, which these days 10 million is probably like the wages of the extras, But and they wouldn't give him the loan, and he didn't want to ask 20th Century Fox because he would lose control of it. So so he was still fighting certain battles because all that merchandising money hadn't quite come in enough yet for him to fully fund it himself. But I mean, there's some great stories even in Empire and Jedi. The whole thing in Return of the Jedi, which as fans we know about, but it's nice to hear from the horse's mouth from the writers and George, and how and Harrison wanted Han Solo killed off, and George was like, no, we're not killing you off. You're not killing you off. That was interesting to actually hear it from the horse's mouth, if you like. So there were so many great stories in the whole documentary. And in the archives of Lucasfilm, there's going to be hours and hours of stuff that we've never seen before. Still, it was such a great documentary.
Release the footage. Come on. Do you think it sort of changed your perspective on how you view the original trilogy after you first watched the documentary? Do you remember that far back? I'm assuming you watched it in 2004 when it was released.
Yeah, I mean, I'd seen other documentaries because there was those VHS releases back in the day, which were also shown on TV. Classic Creatures from Jedi, from
Star Wars: The Jedi
saga. There's Empire Strikes Back one, so obviously read books as well, so it's just good to see it all visually rather than reading about it, so I think it didn't really change my viewing of the original trilogy much because I'd known a lot of this through, like I just said, reading and watching other documentaries. But it's just nice to see a great documentary that, like I've said before, encompasses everything. It looks at the beginning, the 70s, coming out of the 60s, Lucas's own journey, what influenced him, his early movies, the sort of other film directors that he was working with that were coming up at the same time, Martin Scorsese,
Brian De Palma,
all these guys that made great movies in the 70s, 80s, you know, all that sort of stuff. Spielberg, of course, and you know, and then it goes on to the actual struggle of getting Star Wars made, and you know, it was a real labor of love. And I mean, even at, you know, with the special editions, he said that with the original Star Wars, he felt that he only got 60% of what he wanted done in the original movie, but that 60% is fine as it is. You know, it's just that movie unaltered is my favorite Star Wars film. So, you know, and I like the original effects because that's, you know, and, you know, obviously the changing of Greedo and Han, you know, that sort of stuff really sort of is kind of grates many fans, you know, so. But it's also like the cultural impact of Star Wars, which, you know, it's affected us because we're doing a live stream about Star Wars. How many years later, you know, 20 years after that documentary came out. And many years since 78, 77, you know, so it's amazing. And it's affected our lives. We're Gen X guys, you know, we're that generation born in the 70s, early 80s. You know, the impact of the movies, the playing with the toys. I mean, the toys for me was, I'm sure it's for you guys as well, was so critical for, you know, that's why we collect the toys now. And you see in that documentary how Charles Lippincott sort of shopped around Star Wars to different toy companies. They all rejected it. Mego rejected it. Mattel rejected it. Kenner, a smaller company, took it on. And, you know,
the rest is history.
Exactly. Yeah. It's all about taking those chances, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you had a couple of other documentaries there to show off. Do you want to talk about those a little bit? Because, I mean, like I said, this is the first time of me seeing Empire of Dreams. I probably haven't seen these two that you showed off.
So about 10 years ago, I think, or 11 years ago now, there's a guy called RF Biker Scout on YouTube. He was an American guy, and he got in contact with me and said, I'm doing these live streams. Do you want to come on? And I did one with him about the foreign vintage Star Wars figures. I wish it was still up on YouTube, but it's gone. And then must have got in contact with this director here, Chris Mack. He made a movie called The Force Among Us. See, this is signed.
Yeah.
And so I did a live stream with him because he was promoting this film here, which is the one I want to talk about, The Force Among Us.
Yeah.
Or Within Us. So the first one was Force Among Us, and then the second one was Force. So this is quite personal video or documentary about how Star Wars affected him, and it's got some great footage. Obviously, it's not big budget like Empire Dreams, but he goes to the Redwood Forest where they shot Return of the Jedi, and he interviews lots of people that are extras who played stormtroopers, and you know, so he's got quite a lot of footage on this. He also talks to his cousin, and he collects Star Wars himself, so he talks about how seeing Star Wars in 77, 70, and you know, up to Empire and Jedi as well, that how that impacted his life, and you know, also that he lost his father at a young age, and how Star Wars sort of helped him with that loss, and playing with the toys, collecting the toys, and then in the early 90s sort of rediscovering a copy of Star Wars Empire on VHS that he'd recorded, and then that sort of triggered something in him, and he started collecting Star Wars, and probably getting into the Thrawn trilogy and Dark Empire and all that sort of stuff, and then picking up Star Wars stuff then, because that's when I started collecting as well, 93 or late 92. So it's a great documentary, this one. It's got great extras as well. It's limited to, I don't know how many copies, but this one's probably going to be quite hard to find.
I was going to ask.
Both of them will be.
Yeah, I do remember that both those documentaries. I've for about 14 years now, I've listened to a duo called Jimmy Mack and Jason Swank, and they do a Star Wars podcast. And
Jimmy Mack is on this.
Yeah, and they started off as the Force Cast and are now Rebel Force Radio, and I've listened to them for 14 years, and they're very good friends with Chris Marks. And they'd have him on the show as he was making these films, and they'd be in the documentaries as well. I've seen clips of them. I've not seen them all the way through, but what I have seen of them is they're absolutely brilliant and fantastic to watch. So if you can find a copy, Adam, I want to watch it as well.
Okay. It sounds like it's pretty hard to come by.
But I don't. Oh, they're very hard. I got them off him. Because I was talking to him on the live stream, so but
well, if you're watching, if you're watching out there, if you're out there watching, send them to Martin.
No, unfortunately not. No. I mean, they're his creation. I don't know if he'd want them on YouTube as well. I mean, but maybe he should because this one, the one that's signed, is a reissue of the first movie.
Okay.
Right.
So this is the director's cut.
Yeah.
So
fantastic.
Wow. And they're Region 0 as well, so they work anywhere.
All over to BOE's house this weekend then. I just want a tiny little thing to add about Empire of Dreams, if you don't mind, and I thought it would be apt to mention at the end when George Lucas said he fought against the corporations and the system, and by the end of this, he's become one himself, which I thought was what an interesting dichotomy that is. And secondly, I just wish, I know it's going to never happen, but I just wish that they do something like this for the prequel trilogy, an all-encompassing 2.5-hour documentary with behind-the-scenes footage of I know to a lot of older fans it probably wouldn't be as interesting, but to a Star Wars fan, I would love to see them do this for the prequels. And last but not least, if you want to go into more detail and you haven't seen it, especially on the Industrial Light and Magic part of it, on Disney Plus, if you haven't seen it, there's a 6-part
that's brilliant series.
6-part documentary about Industrial Light and Magic and the creation of it. George is in it. All of the main players are in it. They talk about all of the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy, Indiana Jones, Jurassic Park, and it is a fascinating documentary. And I'd say it's as good as this documentary if you're interested in finding out a bit more about the making of the original trilogy and other things in general. That's all I wanted to add. Sorry, Adam.
Well, from what Martin said, I was going to say that by him becoming almost a sort of corporate head, that sort of possibly stopped him from making more movies back in the early 90s. I mean, he did do the original, the prequels, but I was thinking the thing that we really lost was follow-ons from A New Hope, Return of the Jedi, that could have been made in the early 90s. He could have done the Thrawn trilogy then, because they were all young enough then, the actors, So I think he sort of, because his marriage broke up at the end of Jedi. That's what they talk about in the movie as well, that documentary as well, is that he sort of became a stay-at-home father raising the children, and running a massive corporation, Lucasfilm, THX, all that sort of stuff.
Yep. Industrial Light and Magic, Skywalker Sound, and there was Lucas Arts as well, wasn't there? I mean, he literally, and all those companies became the number one in their fields because he pushed them to be the best. And I mean, he's a genius, absolute genius as far as I'm concerned.
Had his own empire himself.
The only thing is, he shouldn't have sold it to Disney.
No,
well,
no.
I think we
all had one mistake.
Awesome.
Brilliant.
Thank you, BOE, for coming on.
Yeah, thanks, BOE.
So cool. Such a great choice. Something completely different from what we've had before. So It was awesome to talk and delve into Star Wars from a different angle.
Great.
In preparation for this discussion, I found out that they'd put outtakes and deleted scenes in the end credits. But I switched off before the end credits came on, or when the credits came on. So I'm now off to check those out. Thanks everyone for watching.
I think it's I was going to say what they were.
I'm going to go and check them out now, BOE. So I'm just going to say thanks to everyone for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, and we will catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.
All right, cheers.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.